You're listening to the uMentor talk show, now available on the Umoja app. I'm your host, Imran Dharamsi, and on this weekly talk show, we invite professionals and teenagers to take us through their journeys and give us advice. So we took a break for another week, but now we're happy to be back. So remember, if you have any questions for our panelists, you can always leave them on the Inspire app, which is Inspire platform, which is available for free on the Umoja app. And before we start, we actually wanted to mention a bit about the Inspire platform. It is a question and answer platform for career advice in our Shia community. So, as a rising professional, what that means for you is you can ask for advice from other professionals in our community. And as a mentor, you can give advice to our community's future professionals as well as students. And so that is available via the Umoja app on Android and iOS with an Umoja account. One other quick thing. We're able to share stories of inspiring professionals, students, and community organizations only because of the generous support of viewers and listeners like you. So we would ask that you please consider supporting our talk show at umojaoutreach.org/donate or through the donate option on the Umoja app. And every little bit truly goes a long way in opening career doors for our youth and connecting our communities. So we thank you for that. And now on to the main point of today's show, today's speaker. Today's speaker is Sister Sabah Hashmi, whose journey has taken her from a senior policy analyst to now an entrepreneur. Sabah is a mom and founder of Sabah's Corner, which is a blog that strives to support Muslim parents in the West. She was born and raised in Canada from a Muslim Pakistani background, so we will also talk about how she has managed to juggle her multiple identities and whether juggle is even the right term. And she holds a bachelor's in public administration and sociology, as well as a master's in public policy administration. She also, when she lived in Canada, she held multiple roles in the Canadian government. And then she relocated to the US after getting married, where she served as director of operations for a health business. Currently, she writes Sabah's Corner. She manages a Facebook group, which we'll definitely talk about, and she serves on the board of directors for a nonprofit organization. So let's welcome Sister Sabah. Assalamu alaikum. Sister Sabah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And so I already did a little bit of the introduction part. But I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you about is, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and especially your educational background?
So born and raised in Canada to Pakistani parents. I went through the public school system in Canada and did my education in public administration. And I'm from Ottawa, so Canada's capital. And I knew from a very young age that I wanted to work with the government. And the running joke, I guess, with family and friends is that I was going to be the next prime minister. So that's the route I took in school. And I did my undergrad in public admin. And then a couple of years later, well, after my undergrad, I started working full time with the government of Canada in the federal public service. And I waited 2 years and then did my master's in public policy and administration in Toronto just to diversify my schools. And then came back and started working with the government again.
Okay. Can you tell us what drew you to go back to school to do your master's?
Well, I knew, I understood very well that at the time when I was doing my undergrad, that undergrad was the new high school level. And if I wanted to move up the ranks in government or in any career, and especially if I wanted to be the next prime minister, I'd have to have some more credentials under my belt. So I knew that would have been a natural next step. I wanted to actually pursue my master's right away, but because I had gotten a job with the government and I did get promoted close to the time where I would have been taking a leave to go do my master's, I ended up deferring it for a year and then went and pursued it. And actually alongside my master's, I did a teaching certificate as well. And with that, you do an internship and I was a TA for first year politics students. So that whole package together is always enticing. So I ended up going that route. But I love to learn. So for me, education was always okay, and I can do something else, and I'll keep going.
Right. Yeah. Great. Yeah. I was just thinking when you're talking about the degrees that you hold, some of our viewers might not really know what public policy administration is. So could you give us a little bit of background as to what that is and specifically what your role was with that degree in the Canadian government?
Yeah, so a public policy and administration degree gives you exposure to how government works and in all
Mm,
levels. There's the municipal government, provincial government, and federal government. And that degree offers courses where, you understand how politics works, right? How a member of parliament works, or the Senate works. And so you understand the
yeah.
structure of government, specifically in a Canadian setting. And
Hmm.
you also you'll have business administration courses. You'll learn about statistics, economics, because all of that is part of developing policy in the government. And that's how you end up applying your skills when you, let's say, become a policymaker, which is the route I had gone down. And
Right.
you use those skills to create legislation if you need to, when you work with, government lawyers, and
Mm.
contribute towards Treasury Board submissions. So it's a lot of that language that's used, and in terms of the theory behind why you do it, which then you use in a practical setting in the government.
And what are some skills that someone who might be looking into working for the government, going into public policy administration, what are some of the skills that they should look for in themselves? Maybe they're interested, maybe they don't know if it's right for them. What would you
Mhm.
advise them?
Number one would probably be writing. Writing is a
Okay.
major skill and component that you need. Um, Having a good proficiency in, like, know how to research, know how to
Hmm.
conduct searches, and be resourceful with, now everything's online, on how to get the right information, and really know how to read legislation, because if you are going down the policy stream, you're working a lot with that, and you need to know government jargon as well. So those are the types of skills that you would probably need. Statistics, right? That's usually
Hmm.
an essential qualification in some policy stream job, like the criteria and jobs. So those are all actually courses that are offered when you do take you do take your actually undergrad and your master's. They're all offered in those. So it does really set you up for success in a government setting.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So it's not necessarily that you have to have those skills before you decide to pursue it in undergrad. It's just those should be the things maybe
No,
you're inclined
yeah.
to do.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, government kind of, or schooling in general, I'm kind of a believer that you learn how to, time manage. You learn actually different type of skills in schooling. You'll learn how to manage time. You'll learn how to juggle different courses all at once, or how to work on several projects at the same time. And I would
Hmm.
probably argue that those skills are much more important in the government setting, because you are typically responsible for multiple files at the same time, and you need to be able to distribute your time accordingly, and be strategic. And those are the types of skills you actually do learn in school. Um, and in a practical setting, everything's always different. But those types of skills are probably even more important. But I think you can learn those in really any degree.
Yeah, thanks. How did you go about getting your foot in the door for jobs, for internships? I know you said right out of college you actually had a job with the Canadian government, which is I heard those are quite competitive. So give us
Yes,
some
yes,
advice on that.
yeah, no, it's okay. So to get my foot in the door,
Yeah.
Canada has this program called the Federal Student Work Experience Program, and it's essentially
Okay.
Canada's largest student employer. And it is super competitive, and it is for
Hmm.
students at the university level to get federal public service work experience. And I had been applying since first year of university, and to be honest with you, I actually never got in until my third
Okay.
year. And
Hmm.
I was at actually a huge disadvantage, because, I mean, as you may know, in Canada, being bilingual is really important, right? It's
Hmm.
an official. There's two official languages, French and English,
Right.
especially in Ottawa, where most of the federal government jobs are. And I always got screened out when it came to languages. So
Hmm.
I would always try to find opportunities to volunteer, to really make my resume attractive, and posture my research projects so I can really list them in my skill set on my resumes. And then when it came to third year of my undergrad, I'm not really quite sure what shifted, but I started getting calls for interviews, and I was now being selected, and all my resume was going through for jobs, and they were
Mhm.
starting to line up. And then I did end up getting a interview for an analyst position with one department that I was really interested in, and memorized everything that I could about that department, and really wanted that job. And the interview went very well. And the next day I got a call back that
Wow.
basically gave me the offer as a student analyst to
Hmm.
start the following week. And then once I graduated, I was then bridged in full time in that same department, and then moved up
That's
the ranks.
amazing. Yeah. What about, I feel like a lot of people, maybe because you said it took you a few tries to get into this program, they might not get in the first time and then kind of quit or not do as much to bolster their application for the next round. So what would you tell to those people? Like how would you speak about the importance of perseverance?
Oh, it's super important, especially um, with the government. It is super competitive, and you're
Hmm.
going against people who have a lot of the skill sets. Just language, was one that was,
Yeah.
may seem small. I know in the government it's not, but
No,
that's
certainly
what
not.
screamed me out. Otherwise, I had all the other skill sets, right? But you have to keep trying. But then the issue here is you don't try the same way. You keep adjusting. You keep trying different approaches to the same
Mm,
issue, and when you do that, then you're able to kind of navigate differently, right? And then you can maybe one way of writing something wasn't as attractive as another way of writing it. Now, all of a sudden, that puts you ahead of the game. So you never want to give up on that, because you never know. For me, I kept trying, and third year, I don't know what shifted, but something did, right? Something was
mhm.
caught on my resume that wasn't caught perhaps in previous years, because I kept adjusting it. And I knew I had to work a little bit harder, because at the time I didn't have the languages, and I did do that because, I mean, don't forget, prime minister was, that was the goal.
Was the
So
goal, yeah.
you know, there was no going back from that.
Mhm. Um, okay. Let's shift gears a little bit, away from prime minister, because you moved to the US, I guess. That that,
Yeah,
uh, that doesn't work out, but where
yeah,
did your yeah, maybe you can be the next president.
right. Yeah,
Um,
it's a little bit different.
yeah. Where did your career go from there, like, after you moved to the US? Because I know there's a huge list of things that you've done even after you moved. So
Mhm.
could you talk us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so actually, I had my career in the government for about 10 years. And
Mhm.
so then after getting married, moved to the US. And I mean, I knew my learning wasn't going to stop there, because I've always been the
Right.
type to want to try new things. It was just a matter of what, when, and how. When I had moved, I wasn't able to do anything right away, because I was going through the immigration process. And
Mhm.
but that was okay, because I was acclimating to the environment, and we
Right.
traveled a little bit. And then then I actually ended up getting pregnant shortly after. And
Mhm.
when that happened, things kind of shifted gears. It wasn't as
Mm.
it wasn't now about going and finding a job or working somewhere. It was about raising a family and
Yeah.
what that means for us. And I realized, and my husband and I, we agreed that it was really important for us to be with our children, especially in their formative years, from the ages of
Mhm.
0 to 7. It was really important for us to be very involved and take their learning and development in our hands during that time, at least. Um, so I had to start being a little bit more creative in terms of what I would do for myself and for employment. Um, and actually, once I did have my child, a few months later, I was invited to be a board of director for a nonprofit organization called the Labor of
Mhm.
Love Doula Program. And later, I was selected to be the treasurer for that organization. And I was so basically, I manage, and I still do this, I manage the accounting. I do the accounting and financial management of the entire organization. And I
Mhm.
guess for those who don't know what a doula is, it's essentially a woman who supports pregnant, expecting mothers during their pregnancy, labor, delivery, and postpartum time. And it's such a great organization, and they provide it's subsidized program. So if there's somebody who can't afford it, then they provide the opportunity for an expecting mother to have a doula if they want one, and we facilitate that and
Okay.
arrange that for them. So that's something that
Wow.
I started doing and I continue to do. And then started having my children, and started doing a lot more of, what else can I do? What else can come up
Hmm.
that makes more sense? Um, and then there's a whole story of how, Sabah's Corner comes in after that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's actually talk about that, because the way I found you actually was through someone told me about Sabah's Corner, and then I thought you would be great to bring on the show. So maybe talk about that, because I know you said you pivoted after you had kids.
Mhm.
What was behind that pivot, and how did it lead to Sabah's Corner?
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, as I said in the beginning, I wear many hats, right? I
Hmm.
identify as being a Muslim, Canadian, Pakistani, and I'm still figuring out being American, but I'll add that to the list as well, right? But you know, with that, I I mean, since growing up, right? Like it's very confusing. What am I? What am I to who?
Sure.
Why am I what I am? Right? We're asking ourselves all
Hmm.
these questions. And growing up, it's really tough when you're being raised in a Western society. In the home, we were very much so Pakistani Muslim, and
Hmm.
in the outside world, I was, Western Muslim, right? So I was always something different somewhere, right? And then
Right.
what I started noticing, and I've gone through this, is I was confused. Like, what am I? Am I defending myself? Am I
Hmm.
Western? Does that mean I let go of everything else? And I guess I can just, so basically that just started, those questions started coming up. Right. A lot of soul
Yeah.
searching starts happening. And
Right.
the shift happened when I was pregnant, because now it was no
Hmm.
longer about me. Right. I'm thinking, I'm now responsible for the morals, the behaviors, the ethics of raising children. And before, I would entrust myself to others to guide me on, what I need to do, how I should do it. But that wasn't going to fly anymore. I couldn't go with the flow anymore. I had to take my parenting journey into my own hands. And
Hmm.
that also meant I needed to know what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I had to ask myself some really tough questions. Um, and when you are in a state of confusion, how are you supposed to raise your children? They'll ultimately come out confused as well, because you're
Yeah.
still figuring it out, or you still haven't gotten
Hmm.
a grasp of it. So I took a lot of time to do research, whether it was Islamic research, Western research, cultural research, just trying to understand um, where I'm coming from and where I stand in this world, like who am I, kind of thing. Uh, and when I was doing that research, I realized that we're so much more than, there's more to us than just our faith and, apparel, right? We have social interests that are the same as in the West, as in the Western context. Our language is similar, our
Hmm.
environment, Western science, our individual preferences. There's so much that aligns, right? But then there's so much that's different too. Uh, and I know that there's millions of people out there that are like me, and they want
Right.
to hold on to their Islamic values, which is exactly, what I was trying to do. So I started dissecting
Hmm.
it all one by one by one. And I mean, um, that's how I slowly started coming into, like I want to also hold on to my mother tongue. My parents are
Hmm.
Pakistani. They taught us how to speak Urdu, and that was important for me. So how do I do that?
Hmm.
These are the types of questions I started asking myself. But
Right.
when I realized that there's so many people out there like me, I didn't really want to do this alone, right? Because this is
Hmm.
often like conversations you have in silos. So you never really reflect on it or talk about it, because we usually shy away from these conversations because they are so convoluted. And often, if you're talking about being Western Muslim, people will think that, oh, you're completely off the tracks, but it doesn't have to be that way. So I wanted to change that rhetoric, and that happened, I guess, when I started understanding what my identities were and what that meant for
Hmm.
me. um, I know you had mentioned to speak about my identities. So
Yes,
this kind
yes.
of like Sabah's Corner really aligns with um, how I manage and juggle my identities and where it came from.
Hmm.
So, I mean, if you want, I can go ahead and talk about that because they're very closely aligned.
Yeah, in fact, one thing that you mentioned that was really interesting when we were speaking before is it's not really, it doesn't have to be about juggling. We always kind
Hmm.
of say that we're trying to balance, be enough of this and enough of this and enough of this, but really they
Hmm.
fit together. We just have to find how. So
Right.
I feel like that's, that's the way that it really connects to Sabah's Corner, and that's really interesting. So if you want
Hmm.
to talk more about that, that would be
Yeah. I guess
enlightening.
to build on that, let me actually define some terms, okay? Because that will
Sure.
kind of give a better understanding of where I'm coming from, and how this works with me, kind of thing. Um,
Hmm.
so for me, I'm Muslim, Canadian, Pakistani, American. I'll bunch up American with Canadian for now.
Hmm.
But to me, I guess being Muslim is, ultimately I believe in God. I believe in Allah. And I believe in the holy book, the Quran, and I believe
Hmm.
in the final messenger, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. At a very fundamental core level, without going into all of the details, that is the core of being Muslim to me. And with that comes a set of beliefs, right? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Um, Islam is a value system as well, where you do good. What is good? Good is you take care of your elders, you treat people with respect, you treat everyone as equals, you
Hmm.
um, you help your neighbor, and what's and there's a list of things that are bad, and those are pretty common as well. You don't lie, you don't cheat, you don't gossip,
Yeah.
you don't eat pork, the list goes
Hmm.
on, and they're pretty straightforward. There's not too much gray area there. um,
Hmm.
so that's how I guess I identify at the core level of being Muslim. Then there's the
Okay.
Canadian, right? I was born there. I
Hmm.
speak both official languages. Now I'm actually bilingual. I speak French and English. I,
Hmm.
um, I attended public schools there and I did my
Hmm.
education there. I paid taxes. I contributed to society through work and
Right.
volunteer. I wear the same clothes as them. You know,
Hmm.
Poutine is actually my favorite food. You can't really get more Canadian
Very
than that.
Canadian.
Right?
Yeah.
So I identify very much so as being Canadian. And then there's the Pakistani side of me, where I speak the language fluently. I can read,
Hmm.
write, and speak Urdu. I love shopping for Pakistani outfits. When it comes to Eid season and wedding seasons, I'm all for it. I do try to, practice some of the traditions and cultures as they're
Hmm.
taught to me by, our elders in the community, our
Right.
parents, and so forth. But I wasn't born there. I've only actually visited Pakistan once in my life. And
Hmm.
I don't really know the authentic culture because when I actually went there the first time, there was actually a huge culture shock for me.
Hmm.
And, but the way Canada is to me is the way Pakistan is to my parents. And because that's really important for them, it's important for me.
Hmm.
And that's why I struggle so much to try and really hold on to that culture because they worked really hard to bring us here and give us the life here. I mean, that's only just the
Hmm.
least we could do. So I have all of these identities, but I identify with them very differently. And
Right.
growing up, I kind of was always trying to just fit in, right? Because we're humans, we
Hmm.
really want to fit in. And when you have all these identities, that's really hard to do because you're not sure if you should go to one side more than the other. Because I was too Western for the Pakistani, I was too Pakistani for the Western, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was really confusing, right? So I ended up, to be more with like the Western people, maybe growing up, I'd like to listen to music, right? That's just an example. Um, I wanted to listen to music. And if I'm listening to music, I'm fitting in with the crowd. We know all the pop songs, the lyrics, but I was shifting away from being Muslim because I was justifying it. I was justifying
Hmm.
why it was okay to fit in because I didn't want to stand out like a sore thumb based on like, the tabloids that I'm reading. I don't want people to think of me differently. I'm already confused. This is just creating
Right.
more confusion. And then the same
Hmm.
thing on the Pakistani side, right? If I'm hanging out with some Pakistani friends, I tend to try to be more Pakistani. And then that also, when you kind of go to one side too much, you start to shift away from certain values that you hold because you start
Hmm.
justifying why it's okay. And
Yeah.
as I then the transformation happens, right? So you're as you grow older and you go through experiences and you try different things, you start realizing it's just not working, coming at the same issue
Mm.
where I'm still confused years later, right? So when I was pregnant and that shift happened, i I was doing the research, and just one day it kind of came to me that I was asking the question the wrong way. I was asking, how do I fit into the West, or how do I fit into the Pakistani culture? And when I asked it that way, I was molding myself into what other people essentially wanted me to be. And
Mm.
you lose a little bit of yourself in doing that. So you ultimately can't have balance in that because you're kind of just swaying back and forth all the time. And
Right.
then what I started to do was, if I ask the question differently, try to be more solution oriented. If I reverse the question, right? If I put my foundation as being Muslim, right? My belief system is I am Muslim. We all have our own belief systems, everybody has their faith. There is a belief system that is your foundation, kind of similar to, if I give an analogy of a home, right? There are some walls that are load bearing walls. If you take those down, the integrity, you're losing the integrity of the house, right? It's at risk of
Mm.
falling.
So that has
And
to be at the
so
center.
that has to be at the
Yeah.
center. So being a
Mm.
Muslim, I put at the center, as opposed to that being what swayed. It was now at the center. So I have my belief system at the center. Now, the question I rephrased was, how does the West fit into my belief system? And how does the
Mm.
Pakistani culture fit into my belief system? And
Mm-hmm.
believe it or not, it it was just a light bulb that just went off for me.
Mm.
And that's when I started to actually see a lot more clarity on who I was, because what I knew now was, I can't compromise my beliefs, but I can find solutions now on how I can make it work and still be integrated into the West. So it went from
Mm.
how I fit in, and there's a little bit of a negative to that because I'm losing myself to be something, to
Mm-hmm.
now looking at how the West can be part of me without losing who I am. And when I started to look at the world that way, it things started to come together a lot easier. I started to know who I was. I started to know how I can make a difference with me and my children, and how I can raise them so they don't feel confused. They have a
Mm.
foundation and they can still blend within the West. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Because a lot of the value systems are there as long as you're not
Yeah.
compromising that. And when I did that, I guess a perfect example of that is in my blog. I wrote a post on play in Islam and Western philosophies.
Yep. It's
And
right there.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah. There it
And
is.
essentially what that was, my children are younger, so I'm at the stage, I'm at this play stage, and what I wanted to look at was, what does Islam have to say about play, the concept of play? Is it even a thing in Islam? I don't know. Let's go do the research, right? Because I have that skill set of doing research, analysis, all of that. I enjoy this type of stuff, so I
Mm-hmm.
did that. I did the research, and surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, um, there was a lot of hadith out there from all different sects that talk about the importance of play in the formative years of 0 to 7, and how much emphasis we should give to that, to the extent that it even says, don't disrupt a child if they're in the middle of playing, right? And it's very powerful, because when we look at these types of things, when it comes to education, for our children, we're often looking to Western science first. And when I reversed it to look at the Islamic perspective first, and then I looked at, now let's see what the West is saying about this same topic. I,
Mm-hmm.
I found that it was only after the 1900s that Western philosophers are coming and talking about how important play-based learning is, and why you should allow your child to play, and how it strengthens them as a human being and an individual, and helps them develop mentally and all of that. And it was a very powerful thing for me, because we always gave the credit to other people, when really centuries
Right.
ago the same concept was already taught to us. And so now
Mm.
what we've done is we've aligned, just by this single post on a very tiny topic in the grand scheme of everything, but one
Yeah.
topic at a time.
Mm-hmm.
We've aligned our Islamic values with our Western values, and we're not standing out. But now we know that, look, Islam said this first, and this is the way to do it. And look, the Western science and the Western world does this as well. and now we can have a common ground, a similarity. We have more inclusiveness,
Sure.
and there's more a positive
Yeah.
outlook on the relationship. So, non-Muslims coming in and seeing this as well, they can see alignment. And that's kind of how, I mean, I'm envisioning it for myself, for my children, so they don't stand out, right? Or they don't know why they don't fit in, or they feel left out. They can have some confidence knowing that their faith um, has a lot of alignment with the Western content. So we just need to know how we can mold it together.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So that was incredible. So really, you kind of connected the identities to what you've done with Sabah's Corner, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I really relate to that point of it's about claiming our identities for ourselves, realizing that
Yeah.
they're our identities, they're not someone else's. So we are
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately almost out of time, but I definitely do want to ask you a little bit more. So let's do two more questions, perhaps.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. Most importantly, how can people get involved with the work that you're doing at Sabah's Corner?
Yeah, so I guess if you go onto my website, you can sign up to get newsletters sent straight to your inbox. I
Hmm.
also am partnered up with some great companies, and they provide like deals and discounts for my subscribers. So that's a great place to get that because we shop for the same products as Western people do as well. Often that's kind of overlooked. It's beyond apparel. There's also um, all of the products essentially,
Yeah.
and also I started a Facebook group because I was getting a lot of emails from people asking questions, kind of asking me further into different posts that I wrote, and I just figured that it would be a great way to bring everybody together and learn from each other, share with each other, and care for each other in a safe, judgment-free space. And so the Facebook group is Muslim Motherhood in the West. So if there are
Mhm.
any mothers out there, whether you're expecting, you're a new mother, experienced veteran mother, you're welcome. As long as you live in the West, because we do have that shared understanding of the Western concept. And,
Yeah.
please join and share your experience with us because that's one of the best ways we can learn from each other.
Okay. Thank you. Now, I truly wish we had more time, but unfortunately, we're out of time. However, we
No
always ask
problem.
our speakers this question, which is, what is your final piece of advice? And I know when we had talked about it before, you had mentioned that you wanted to tailor it to youth. So, what is your final piece of advice to youth from this interview?
Okay, yeah. Um, I think is really important nowadays to identify. So I mentor some youth, and I always tell them this as well. You take your skill set and find your passion, and work with that in understanding where the world is going, and align that with the opportunities that are available to you. Because you'll find that you'll be more
Mhm.
successful. It'll be less like a job, more like opportunities. And alongside that, your strongest support system is Allah, is the Prophet, and is his family. Life's a crazy road, goods and bads, wins and losses, and you're really going to need to hold on to something in order to really prosper and be solution oriented. And that is your backbone to everything.
Thank you. And thank you, Sister Sabah, for
Thank
all your
you.
advice. Fascinating conversation, and
Thank you.
best of luck with everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the uMentor Talk Show. You can tune in next week again for another interview. And remember, there are lots of places you can catch our previous episodes. That includes YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, our website, and even in our app. And so we hope you catch us on all those platforms. Umoja Outreach Foundation, uniting and empowering the Shia community.